there's a little bit of a softness to the older Vito that you kind of almost wish that he could go legitimate. But of course, part of the tragedy is that it can't happen.
Which ultimately he maybe deserved. That was the price he paid for what he did his whole life, you know?
Tig, I had you watch a movie. Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather. Are you ready to discuss this movie with me, Tig Carson?
I am Godfather.
I'm not doing the whole episode. All right, guys.
So to clarify for viewers, because of course The Godfather is a big deal as far as movies are concerned, and you being a movie guy, a lot of people might be like, Tig didn't see The Godfather. As I understand it, it's not that you haven't had many opportunities to see The Godfather. You have actively and purposely avoided this movie, correct?
Yes, it took everything in me to just sit down and say I'm watching it finally.
Why have you avoided this movie all these years?
I would say it's because as an Italian American living in New Jersey, I guess just growing up my whole life, I sort of didn't care to see it because I felt like what am I like? How is this going to be entertaining? Like, I know how everything is. I know who all these people are in some capacity. Who cares?
Yeah. Also, having grown up in a deeply Italian family in New Jersey, there was a degree to which this picture was almost kind of a religion. It was held as this holy thing, this rite of passage, and you had to know it inside and out.
Like you said, because of the fact that it was a touchstone for many Italians, sort of you need to watch it, because I have that thing in me that when everybody likes something, I just immediately go, nah, I don't need to see it.
I'll make him an offer he can't refuse.
So with that out of the way, with that little background out of the way, because I do think that context is pretty important. Now that you actually have gone through with it and seen it, what did you think? What were your impressions of The Godfather?
After I sat on it, I guess it was like a day and a half. I liked it. Like, I started to understand that maybe a lot of people that aren't Italian, it was like a peek inside to this world that people aren't familiar with. I actually liked it so much that I was tempted when my wife went to bed to watch the second movie.
You actually skipped right to what my final question was going to be, which I mean, we'll get it out of the way now. Then, now having seen The Godfather, and I'm one of the folks who think that The Godfather Part 2 might be better than the first. Do you think that at some point, just on your own, you might be inclined to watch the second one now?
That'll be the next movie I probably watch, because everyone always says the second one's better, and I can understand why, because the first movie has now established the story. So I guess the second one's kind of like The Empire Strikes Back in a way, the Two Towers, like everyone knows what's going on.
What are the things that you think people see in the picture, and what did you specifically see in the picture that made you say, okay, you know what? Yeah, this was worthwhile.
What I enjoyed was Al Pacino's, that's Michael, right? Because all the
Yes.
names is just Sonny, Michael, and I didn't know the movie was really about him. I didn't know that. I immediately, because I didn't know anything about it, I just assumed it was going to be about
Marlon
Brando, and I really had no idea where it was going to go, because I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know anything.
Oh,
So-
interesting. I kind of figured that you would at the very least have some rough knowledge on just some of the big key scenes, specifically the scene in the Italian restaurant when he assassinates the police captain, the Turk, as well as the very, very famous baptism scene near the end of the picture.
Nope. Like I said, I knew like the jokes from through the years, like if you watched Mel Brooks, or if you watched The Simpsons, or you watched whatever, I knew the jokes, but I did not know the storyline at all. Because when things happen, like when Michael leaves after killing the police officer and the other mob guy, and he has to go to Italy, and he's going to get married. He's getting married. He meets a girl. I was like, oh, so he's going to flee, and they're going to ask him to come back, and he's going to say, no, my life has changed. I don't want any part of this.
Oh, interesting.
That's what I'm thinking, because I don't have any idea. And it was kind of funny because I'm watching it with my wife who saw it. She kind of like ruined it for me because she assumed I knew what was going on, and she sort of made a comment that made me know he was going to go back. And I was like, wait, what do you mean he's going to go back? Like
Oh no.
this is the story
Interesting.
arc. Like he's staying. He's not going to get dragged back into this. So it was kind of funny because I had no idea about any of that.
I love that you came into it that fresh. I'm genuinely surprised. I kind of figured that sort of by osmosis, very similar to people who haven't seen Star Wars, but they know about Star Wars.
Right.
But yeah, I guess if you've just purposely kind of been like, nah.
I was surprised by Sonny's death. That was a real shock. Like I didn't expect him to get gunned down at a toll plaza. Like
in an incredibly like brutal scene for its time, where I think a James Caan talks about that he said he was like in actual pain, like it was actually painful because they blew up like 100 of the damn thing. Yeah, I'd like that you came into it so fresh, because you mentioned something earlier that I think is kind of really important to this picture, is that the titular Godfather, you could have the impression that it is Marlon Brando's character, Don Vito Corleone, because of course, in the very first scene, which is a brilliantly shot and staged scene, incidentally, with the camera on the mortician and just slowly panning back, and he's talking about "I love America."
Yeah.
And he's talking about his experience as an immigrant, and the camera slowly drawing back to reveal Don Corleone. Of course, your impression is, oh, of course, the movie he is the Godfather, but really, in a lot of ways, the titular Godfather is Michael, because the movie is about his transformation from a guy who didn't want anything to do with the dark side of his family. He was very adamant in the beginning. That's my family, Kay. It's not me.
That's my family, Kay. It's not me.
But
and his dad didn't want him to have anything to do with it as well.
I never wanted this for you.
yeah, even his brothers, Sonny, Santino, he laughs at the idea that Michael's going to take part in some of this stuff. And Michael initially only really begins to take part because he's concerned about his father. His father
Right.
gets gunned down. So first he's going to the hospital in order to ensure that he has protection, because he finds out that his father's sort of left alone. He's sort of playing pretend on the stairs, pretend tough guy.
Him and the baker.
Yeah. If it wasn't for some like legit police brutality, he might not even have gotten pulled into things. He says, this isn't personal, it's business. But was it?
No, it was totally personal. That was you killed, you tried to kill my dad.
Yeah, you tried to kill my dad.
You beat me up.
You broke my jaw. And once he sort of got taste of that, and he understood how people were willing to kowtow to him, as they say, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This film is about Michael's corruption as a person.
Vito, I mean, he's a mob boss. I get it. He's like a bad guy. He's calling hits and all that stuff. But ultimately, Vito seemed less of a, like, Michael seems like he's he's going to become a tyrant. Like, he's going to be worse than his dad. His dad sort of had a humanitarian part of him. At least maybe he was getting older, and he was starting to think like, I don't want to be involved in this kind of thing. But Michael seems like he's a little bit of a, like, it was in there the whole time, I think festering, and then this was an excuse for it to come out.
I think you have an exact right read on both of those characters. I agree with you 100%. There's almost a softness to Vito Corleone. He doesn't want wanton murder. He doesn't want his people involved in narcotics, not just because it's a dicey game that might get them in trouble, but because they ruin lives. He feels like, look, we've got a good thing going. We've got families. Him in particular, he has grandchildren. If he had a darker past, he's certainly, if not left it behind, he's trying to move on from that.
How did things ever get so far? I don't know.
I kind of feel like he wouldn't approve of where Michael ended up. You get the sense that when he first finds out that it was Michael who did these assassinations, you kind of get the sense that the wind is knocked out of him.
I never wanted this for you.
He was supposed to be the better example of us.
Yeah, because doesn't he say he mentioned something about him being like a governor or a senator instead of the head of the mob?
The Jew would be the one to hold the strings. Senator Corleone.
I think the opening wedding scene, which is close to a half an hour, it's I think it's a good solid 25 minutes. Just a big, long, extended family wedding scene. But I think that's kind of important because in a lot of ways, the film isn't as much about the mafia stuff as it is about the family stuff. It's about the decay within the family. You have to kind of set the stage for that and give people an understanding of what the family is and what the family dynamic is. However, there's this terrible darkness that lies underneath it, which really comes to a head by the end of the picture when you've got things like Michael having his brother-in-law killed.
Don't be afraid, Carlo. Do you think I make my sister a widow?
Which, by the way, is an incredibly staged scene when he's strangled in the car and the car takes off and he's kicking out the window as the car's driving
and
off.
His foot just ends up like, half blocking the camera after,
Scene.
And I'm glad he killed him.
Yeah, he was a dirtbag.
Yeah.
He was an absolute dirtbag.
Hey, Mikey! You wanted on the telephone.
But at this time, 1970, I don't think that Middle America had really been exposed to the full-on Italian thing.
Hey, come over here, kid. Learn something. You never know, you might have to cook for 20 guys someday.
Even setting the mob part of it aside, it's still that whole, you've got the old guy at the wedding who's dancing and the singing and all that stuff, I think was pretty new to a lot of Americans at the time. Which it's important to note, a lot of this was invented whole cloth by Mario Puzo, who wrote the novel that the film is based on. He didn't actually do all this deep research into actual, Italian mafia customs and how it operates and stuff. He was just pulling stuff out of his ass. He
did nail the Italian part of it, though.
Yes, though that was Coppola.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, you could just, that is what that's very spot on.
Especially the wedding scene, but also a lot of the family scenes after that. They have a great air of authenticity, and I think you can attest to that. Because we have both been at those gatherings. I swear, every time I see this, I swear that I see relatives in the crowd.
Yeah.
And it has an air of authenticity because half of those people were Francis Ford Coppola's family. Many of them that he was very close to, that he brought in. Even a lot more improvisation going on than you would think in such a meticulously crafted movie. There's the bit in the beginning where the big thug is sitting outside and he's practicing his lines, and I hope your first son is a masculine son, right?
I knew that.
Michael, that man over there is talking to himself.
And because I've also heard his name a million times from people mentioning his name.
His name is Luca Brasi.
That was inserted afterwards because when they did the scene inside, he was awkward with his lines.
Don Corleone, I am honored and grateful that you have invited me to your daughter's wedding. I hope that their first child be a masculine child.
That was one of the things my wife actually noticed when we were watching. She's like, it sounds like a lot of these lines are almost ad-lib.
Anyone who is working with Marlon Brando has to expect that because that's just what Brando does.
Yeah.
Brando does not do scripts whatsoever.
Right.
Almost to the point where he famously almost ruined the Apocalypse Now. There are so many layers to that character. There's so much that's happening that isn't being said, but you just feel it in his performance. You understand that there's a lot of nuance to the character, and that's just all Brando. I think Pacino accomplished, maybe not to Brando's level, but Pacino accomplished a lot of that as well. Pacino's acting here is I think some of the best of his career. He's now better known for big and bold, in things like Dog Day Afternoon and Scarface. So, so he's known for that. Oh, I'm Al Pacino. He's really understated here.
Which is cool because I like those characters. I like those simmering volcano characters that there was like something underneath the surface this whole time.
And my father assured him that either his brains or his signature would be on the contract.
There's that excellent scene, maybe about 2/3 of the way through the movie, when he goes out to see him and Tom. Robert Duvall, also fantastic in this picture. Him and Tom go out to Vegas to see Frito. The whole thing happens, and he just says to Frito, don't ever side with anyone against the family again.
Right.
And just the way he says it, there's not overt menace there. He says it kind of softly, almost like he's just sort of advising his brother on something, but it's chilling.
Mike, you don't come to Las Vegas and talk to a man like Mo Green like that.
You're my older brother, and I love you. But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again.
Don't make that second mistake.
Yeah, I think there's only one scene in the film where he loses his temper. And I think even in that scene, I think he's faking it. And that's the very end, the very last scene, when Kay asks him if he actually had his brother-in-law murdered.
Don't ask me about my business.
No.
And he gets mad and he does the Al Pacino, like slam his hand on the desk. But I think that was performative on Michael's part. I think he was purposely trying to scare her out of the room. And then once he realized maybe that wasn't going to work, he went back to what his actual anger is. There's probably a discussion to be had as to whether or not his downfall, his decay into this person was inevitable. To just sort of get the sense that when he was in Italy, that he almost sort of became intoxicated with the idea that people feared him. There's a scene when he's at the cafe.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you knew he was the way he was when he tells his guards, go bring him back out here. And he did that thing where he has that conversation with him in a calm way, but he's intimidating. He literally intimidates the father that I'm marrying your daughter.
There are people who pay a lot of money for that information, but then your daughter would lose a father.
Allora vorrei perdere buon padre.
Instead of gaining a husband.
Yeah, how insane is that? Where he's basically like, this is happening, and he drops his name, of course,
right,
which is the name of the town. So there's, it's unspoken, but it's very clear.
Was that always in him, or did that happen after he kills those two guys? I think he probably would, if he became a governor or senator, he still was going to become a terrible person.
I agree, and that is made clear. That even he finally recognizes that when he comes back to America and he meets Kay outside of the school, he compares himself to, just like a senator. She's like, well, senators and presidents don't have people killed. And he's like, now who's being naive?
Father's no different than any other powerful man, like a senator or a president.
You know how naive you sound.
Why?
Senators and presidents don't have men killed.
Oh. Who's being naive, Kay?
On one hand, he's not wrong. I mean, he's right about that. However, isn't that a really nihilistic way to look at things? We've talked somewhat about the story and the characters. I do want to touch on a little bit, but I feel like this is a beautifully shot and directed movie as well. I mean, I think Coppola was just really firing on all cylinders. He's got such a lot of really enjoyable camera work here. The way he stages certain scenes. There's the one out in the Meadowlands when the one hit is done, the take the gun, leave the cannoli.
Yeah, I love that shot. They're basically in the swamps.
Terrific shot. The camera is just sort of set back, and you've got the car there. He's sort of out taking a leak. Coppola was very content with saying, "Here's the camera, here's the scene, and we're going to look at this as if we are outside observers, that we're sort of peering through the Meadowlands grass and watching this go down." And that distance, I think, makes the impact a lot more powerful with it. You get to the end with the baptism scene. It's one of the most famous scenes in the movie. The combination of the church music and the priest doing his
crying
thing.
Baby,
and the crying baby just ringing throughout the whole thing. The cutting back and forth between these brutal murders and the actual baptism, and the way it plays into the actual dialogue of the baptism itself. Right? I mean, the horror really begins when the priest asks, "Do you renounce Satan?"
Michael Francis Rizzi, do you renounce Satan?
To renounce him.
There's so much symbolism and everything that's going on in that scene. It's insane. Yeah. Like he's being baptized as the Godfather, like during that scene.
Yeah, it is. It's very much. It's sort of it's his baptism as well as his godchild's. It's one of the reasons why I think The Godfather continues to be effective, and why, regardless of your opinion of mafia movies, why I think it works. And we've talked about this in personal conversations about Goodfellas as well, which is a completely different kind of picture.
Right.
These two movies get compared, and there's really not.
They're not the same. They're not the same.
Yeah, they're completely different beasts. But they both do one thing which that's very similar. They don't try and make you think of them as anti-heroes. They don't try to make you idolize them. It's very clear that these are horrible people, and it's okay for you to be engrossed in watching them. But yes, they're horrible people. Recognize that these are not good human beings,
Right?
And I think that's important. And like we were talking about before, there's a little bit of a softness to the older Vito that you kind of almost wish that he could go legitimate. But of course, part of the tragedy is that it can't happen.
Which ultimately he maybe deserved. That was the price he paid for what he did his whole life,
We're seeing very much the same things here, and I think you, even after watching this your first time, like, have an excellent grasp of what the thematic content of this is here, because what you just said is the theme of the entire trilogy. This idea of the things that you've done, you can't walk away from them. It's a theme that runs throughout all three movies, as you'll certainly see if you go on to watch 3.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to watch the second one, like I said, because I know everybody always says that it's the best, and I need to now see how Michael turns out.
I have to say, I'm not maybe surprised, but to some extent, yeah, I'm happy that you enjoyed this. I think when I first gave it to you, I said outright, like, I'm not even entirely sure that you're gonna enjoy this. Hell, just the fact that you now want to watch the second one is like, oh, okay, clearly you must have enjoyed it. Otherwise, you'd be like, okay, cool, I saw it, I'm ready to move on.
I'm glad that I got to finally see it.
For our 25th episode, not only do a big, important picture with a lot of meaty material to talk about, but that also it was part of a long-time personal journey for you that we managed
a very
to
long time. This coming Thanksgiving at my family's house is going to be amazing. So, Eric, you this week will be watching for the first time the mockumentary Best in Show.
125th annual Mayflower Kennel Club Dog Show. To think that in some countries these dogs are eaten.
That goal is that Best in Show ribbon.
Actually, poodle means puddle in German.
You want your busy bee?
Come get your busy bee. God, Hamilton, if she doesn't get her door, she's gonna flip out!
It's not in here. You left it at the hotel. Go to the hotel and get busy bee! You look at me!
Awesome. I look forward to this one. So, all right, Best in Show it is. I will be watching that, and I will return to this space to talk with you about it.
That's right.
If you think that The Godfather does not deserve the landmark accolades that it gets, say so, say why in the comments. If you do think that it is, and there's something that we haven't touched on, also discuss that in the comments. I will also say that by the time you see this episode, Tig will already have seen The Godfather Part 2, so it is okay to discuss that movie with spoilers in the comments as well. We will be happy to talk about it with you in the comments, because I think it's a safe bet that you'll have already cleared that off the plate by the time this
Most definitely.
Excellent. Thank you so much for watching, folks. And you can find us on Patreon at Nerd Out With Me. You want more, or you want to see these episodes early, or you want me to put my finger uncomfortably close to the camera.
And thanks for hanging out at the movie club.
Yeah, this really looks disgusting.